the intro. Thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure to be here in Sydney, Australia. This is my first time coming to Australia. Yep. This is the most Australian accents I've ever heard in my life in a single room. Here's my talk. You can move that little box up to the out of the way. I don't know. John is our good friend and possibly the most unique and distinct person I've ever met in my life. If I reflect on the various people I've met in my life, we're just talking how if you met John, he made an impression on you no matter what was going on, what you were talking about. So it's just a very unusual ability. And here you see some of his unusual abilities demonstrated in these pictures. Okay, yes, so nice to be in Sydney. I couldn't help it when I noticed on Google Maps, we're a very short walk from Dowling Street. I don't know if the food there is any good, but maybe we could arrange to have a dinner there. I would certainly love to go there and take pictures on Dowling Street. I'm also lucky to be here because a few minutes before my flight was to take off, silly me, I realized, oh, I need a visa to come to Australia. But maybe I sound stupid. But yeah, I've heard this is a common thing. I just think it has to do with going to Europe a lot and figuring like, okay, Australia is associated with the UK somehow. Anyway, sorry, I don't mean to offend the local Australians here. But it's also like, yeah, we need a visa to go to your country also. I didn't know that either. Yeah, so anyway, okay. And my bags are not so lucky. Supposedly they're in Honolulu right now, or on their way to Honolulu. So, and I was told they're gonna arrive next week. So I went out and bought this shirt yesterday, Bondi Beach, as a tourist, and I have new underwear. I'm not gonna show you that. And I posted on Facebook about this. I said, oh, gee, can I borrow clothes from someone? And Peter Rohde stepped in and said, this is the, I don't know if you can read this. He said, this is the Dowling conference. Who needs clothes? And then when I heard this, I reflected. I was like, I always remember John being clothes. But Peter Rohde, maybe not so much. This was a promotion of his book on Twitter, so that, the no clothes part can be reserved for the Peter Rohde conference whenever that happens. Okay, Zixin, where there was no code of conduct for this conference, right? And so I thought to show the Dowling Conference Code of Misconduct. So here are the rules. You're allowed to say whatever you want to whomever, as long as it won't get you fired. This is somehow a part of the Dowling Code. You're also allowed to write whatever is needed to get your paper published in PRL, even if it's wrong. And I'm delighted, it's fascinating that there's gonna be a Dowling wrong session later. I'm curiously anticipating this. And the point is you can issue a PRA correction later. I observed this happen. You're allowed to promise anything that will get you funded. He did that, and he did really well with funding. It was amazing. One of his mantras was act first, apologize later. I heard this several times. And he was actually amazing at apologizing. I remember him walking into my office, beating his heart, going, mea culpa, mea culpa. I was like, wow, that was, and so I just couldn't help but forgive him for what he did to really piss me off. Okay, also, I think everyone knows, by Irish rules, you can retell a story as many times as you want, as long as there's at least one person at the table who's not heard it before. How many have heard this before? Like the entire room? Okay, good. There's more. You're allowed to liberally embellish a story to enhance its comedic value. Many times with these stories, you learn from the people involved in the stories, well, that part wasn't quite true. More Irish rules. If you don't reply, I'll assume your answer is yes. I saw this executed several times. You're allowed to refer to the people actually doing the research for you as underlings, henchmen, minions, OCD. I think I was called all of these things at some point, one point or another. You're allowed to include random people as co-authors, as long as the author initials spell out things that you find funny, like Mordor. The two O, there was Johnny Olson, and then his brother was contacted, and then an undergrad, Evan Rabot, who had the second R. And in a group meeting, I remember saying to John, you know, you can actually also spell out moron. And he thought that was hilarious. It was great. He just cracked up laughing. And another part, if anyone else besides Dowling applies these rules, you were allowed to get mad at them, call them a cheater, or make fun of them. I saw this executed also. Okay, good. About myself, my connection to John was, through being from Louisiana. You know, John grew up all over the US, but eventually landed in Louisiana. And somehow that was quite special for me. And so we ended up there together. And I was born and raised in Louisiana. When I went to college, I went to Texas A&M. I returned to Louisiana for a master's at Tulane, went to a PhD at USC, but at the time I was looking for a summer job. And then that's when I got in touch with John. I saw, oh, there's this guy in Louisiana doing the thing that I'm really excited about. And wow, I can go there and work with him. And so the whole thing was really remarkable and set me off on a path to where I am now. And then much later, at least he made it sound this way, me getting hired in Louisiana was singularly due to him. And he reminded me of this every few months, I would say. Recently, after John died, basically everything changed, being at this ground level. And I sought out new opportunities and landed recently at Cornell. So now I've moved there. I still haven't really adjusted to being there because I was in Louisiana for so long. Like I had to fill out the form to get in Australia, and I was about to write my state is Louisiana. I was like, oh, damn it, I'm in New York. Okay, so another thing is, in some senses, I feel like I'm maybe the wrong person to begin with this talk because my actual scientific collaborations with John were somewhat limited. We had a lot of exchanges. We were managing the students. We were working together. We got along well socially, very well. And our styles are very different. Having dinner last night, this quote came out, oh, you're one of those QIP people. You know, if you're familiar with the QIP conference, maybe not so many are. I see Ivan nodded his head. And so there's a bit of different styles. But we did publish papers together at least. So I do have a Dowling number of 1, right? Many of you in the room don't have a Dowling number of 1. Who here has a Dowling number of 1? Okay, pretty sizable. Yeah, good. But what we have here in common is our strong mutual love of John, and also that he was so endearing and so willing to help so many people, so many younger people. And so that really ends up affecting you no matter how many times he might piss you off. You mentioned this in your talk. Maybe I'm saying it a bit stronger. Anyway, but that really is the case, that I'll just say plainly that I have a very strong love for John. And that's why I'm here. Because we already had a first Dowling Memorial Conference that I organized in Louisiana and spoke at, et cetera. And so now we're on the second, and Ephraim Steinberg on Facebook earlier today said that he possibly would host, he thinks it should be a series, and he might host. I said, well, you should host the third. Okay, so make him stick to that. Good. So I'm going to tell you some of the things I want to sort of demonstrate to you the love that I had for John and the different things that I did for him after he passed away so shockingly and unexpectedly. His second popular book, after he passed away, I was in very close contact with his siblings, and they asked me, oh, he didn't actually finish it. Could you do the final edits? It's like, oh man, all right. But I did it, and when I was doing this, I could hear John speaking and shouting to me while reading it. It was a very emotional experience because it was just after he died, and it was like the following 2 or 3 weeks, like every day, reading these stories and hearing him shouting at me, and like, oh, just quiet down a little bit. Okay. Oh, I did want to say, I did not remove most things, but there were 2 things that were somehow too strong. I suspect he was like drinking a bottle of wine when he wrote it, and I pulled one insult that I don't know. Maybe there would be different opinions of this, but this was an editorial thing. And then there was a misquote of an LSU vice president of research. This is, part of the code of misconduct. And I got in touch with him. I was like, did you say this? It was like, no. I said, people are misquoting me all the time. Okay, the other thing we did is a month after John passed away, we had an online memorial. This was during COVID, during the lockdown. And we had his 2 sisters speak on his behalf. One, Tricia read a poem that John had written. John was quite a poet, by the way, was always finding rhymes with everything in some of his personal writings. And his sister Ellen, I remember her saying that, John didn't have, he wasn't married or didn't have children of his own, but the whole community surrounding him really was his family. Like many people here today, he considered his family. And the students who worked with him, he considered his children and looked after him like that. And that, you'll find that out there, but it's not so common. And he felt very strongly about it, helping people. The next thing that happened, and maybe I should write a manual about this, like what to do when a professor dies. My God, it was just so many things to deal with. John welcomed so many people into his world, including students. There was, if you were a student and you went to meet with him and say, I'd like to be part of your group, he would print off a sign that day, such and such, Mark Wilde joined the LSU QST group on this day, and then put it on a desk. And it had the effect of making a person feel special, but he did have an ulterior motive. He was very territorial in the department, and he wanted to maintain his territory. So that when people were coming around checking, like, oh, is that desk available? Oh, is that available? No, it's not. It's part of Dowling. And so he had many students, so we had to handle his grants. And he was so good at pulling in funding. He had 2 big sizable grants come in after he died. It was unbelievable. And I ended up overnight taking on 4 of his PhD students. Students were kind of used to being able to say whatever they wanted to John, including once I heard an FU to him in a group meeting, which to me is unimaginable. And so they needed a bit of acclamation when coming to work with me, but this was somehow not acceptable. There were all these like little Johns walking around. You can imagine a world, what the mess it would be if everyone acted like that. Okay, so the next thing is with Jim Franson, we wrote a memorial in Nature Photonics. And if you haven't read that already, I encourage you to look at it. And I'll read you some excerpts. This was from Jim recalling this. During his PhD, John worked in the foundations of quantum mechanics and later often joked how he was told at the time by other professors that you will never get a job doing this crackpot stuff, right? So ultimately, we were talking about how quantum foundations was intersecting with quantum optics and eventually became quantum information overlapping also. And so ultimately, John had his last roaring loud laugh at whoever these professors were. They're nameless. Okay. Another thing he would do in some of his boson sampling papers, John enjoyed playing jokes on editors by thanking fictitious people. And in boson sampling, he thanked a Dr. Schmampling, trying to say it like he would, for helpful discussions and sharing his intellectual insights. The other thing that we did is we incorporated this Dowling-Nevin law into the Nature Photonics article. I'm going to get back to that in a minute. I think many of you will probably have seen this cartoon before. So Jim recalled this, that John was at these government meetings with these very serious agencies, DARPA, Army Research Lab, National Security Agency. It sounds extremely intimidating. And what he did was, despite the serious nature of these meetings, he would entertain everyone with cartoon depictions of all the government sponsors, NASA, DARPA, NSA, and this kind of Wizard of Oz diagram, quantum land of odd, wicked witch of pessimism, flying monkeys of decoherence, etc. Right? Really amazing. And oh, AMCOM, I don't know what that is. Maybe that agency doesn't exist anymore. But I don't think, what's that? Good point. Yeah, I haven't seen anyone do this after him. I don't know if anyone else really could do this, right? It's just so unique. This is a story that Jim liked that he shared in the article. This is the Paul Dirac and John's laughter story. How many have heard of this one? All right, good, so very few. John once attended a lecture by the famous theoretical physicist Paul Dirac. It was supposed to be a lecture for the general public, and many people from the local community came to hear the famous physicist, but the lecture was totally incomprehensible, and the audience was dismayed until Dirac said that he was going to discuss Einstein's famous relation between energy and mass. John said that everyone in the audience leaned forward in anticipation of hearing something that they could finally understand. But instead of discussing the famous equation E equals mc squared, Dirac showed another equation that was only familiar to an expert. At that point, with complete silence in the room, John laughed out loud with his, great cackling laugh. And, Jim is sure that it was loud enough that Dirac must have heard it in the audience. Okay, this is another joke that John would tell. I don't know, I find this very funny. Two theoretical physicists on death row. So they're on death row and they've been in the same cell for 10 years. One night, the warden comes and says, "You're going to be executed tomorrow. Any last wishes?" The first theoretical physicist says, "Well, I've been in this cell working on a new theory for the last 10 years, and I would like to present it to all of the populace of the prison. So my final last good idea doesn't die with me." And the warden says, "Sure, we'll set up a PowerPoint for you. You can make some slides and present your results." He turns to the second theoretical physicist and says, "What is your last dying wish?" The second theoretical physicist says, "I would like to be taken out and shot before the other guys talk." Classic Dowling. I mean, I think he made this up, right? I mean, like, I've never heard or anything like this before, but it's so brilliant. Okay, so back to John's Wikipedia page. Another thing I did was to edit it to credit him with the Dowling-Nevin law. For whatever bizarre reason, he wanted this so badly. And I'm going to show you the evidence that he wanted this so badly. I don't know, I couldn't comprehend, like, why do you need this? Why is this so important? And I guess his answer would be, well, he had the idea first. So first bit of evidence, he wrote a blog post about it. So after this Nevin law came out in Quanta, he starts out his blog post. It's obvious that he's bitter. In a recent article in the magazine Quanta, much ado was made about the new so-called Nevin's law, blah, 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 blah. Hartmut Nevin is the director of the Google Quantum AI Lab. In some sense, at least for the quantum cognoscenti, this is a trivial observation, blah, blah. And then he goes on to say like how he said it first in his book. But if you read his book, this can go in the wrong session. It was really wrong what he said. And I had several discussions with him trying to convince him that he was completely wrong, but it was still obvious that he wanted so badly. So, and here's more evidence. He went into Wiki. Who here has edited Wikipedia? Interesting. Okay, very interesting. So maybe you. What years did you do this, Howard? What years did you editing Wikipedia? No, like Wikipedia in general. 2005. Okay, the rules were different then. Long ago. Okay, a month ago. Okay, the rules have changed dramatically since like 2015 on, where it's unbelievable the number of rules, and the people will cite the rules like these wiki elves, messing around with Wikipedia. So John was going in and editing his own. He created his own Wikipedia page, and he was editing it very actively over the years. This is completely against the rules, okay? But he didn't know that, and like it wasn't like that back in 2005, right? So here's like a wiki person telling him, you need to read this document, that document, this thing. And then it goes on. He created a Dowling Nevin law Wikipedia page, but then it was eventually marked for deletion because there wasn't like significant sources besides his own blog posts, right? And the Quanta article, and they didn't consider it significant. And then there's this extended discussion between him and the wiki people. They figured out that he was editing his page and citing like wiki conflict of interest, et cetera. And this goes on and on. And there's records of it. It's all recorded, right? And so this is even longer, right? And it's like, oh, you have outed yourself as John Dowling. He's like, pleading like, why was this U.S. Army award deleted from my page? I'm not employed or paid by the U.S. Army. And it goes on, you're editing the Dowling Nevin law. Here's a rule, you're a Wikipedia paid editor. There's a conflict of interest, you're a paid editor. You need to look at wiki lawyering, right? It's like insane. Topic, you're facing a topic ban, et cetera. Goes on and on. So, I mean, be careful with Wikipedia. Otherwise, you'll be outed and have lawyers. Okay. So what we did is through this process, I kind of familiarized myself with the Wikipedia rules. And I realized, oh, if there's a valid scientific paper that's talking about the Dowling Nevin law, so that went in the Nature Photonics memorial article, and now it's on Wikipedia discussion, and saying a correct statement that was later made by John Preskill about how this should be interpreted. The classical cost of a simulation, simulated quantum computer, if the number of qubits on quantum computers keeps growing exponentially with time, then the classical cost of simulating will be doubly exponential. And so that's like a huge overhead, right? Because if you take the two exponentials, the classical cost of simulating is exponential and the number of qubits is growing exponential, then this will be the double exponential. In his book, he talks about the Hilbert space dimension size, but that's not the right argument. It's about the classical cost. And he was saying the Hilbert space size is like the computational power, but that's not. Oh, it's. Okay, we can have a wiki editing session. I'd be very happy to do that. Okay. How are we doing on the time? On the hour, so there's like 15 minutes? Another 10 minutes. All right, okay, we have to pick it up. So John's house, Another thing we did was we helped his siblings. There's Mike Dowling, Trisha Dowling, Eliza Siddiqui is a student who was close to John. We moved his stuff out of his house. One thing I think would be that he would find very funny that he doesn't realize is that he would have rolled on the floor laughing if he had learned that his house was sold to the son of former Louisiana Governor Edwin Edwards, a remarkable coincidence, who spent time in jail with his father for bribery. If you look on Wikipedia, Edwards was found guilty on 17 of 26 counts, including racketeering, extortion, money laundering, mail fraud, and wire fraud. His son was convicted on 18 counts. Amazing. And they're now in John Dowling's house. They're living there right now. I don't have to look it up. Okay. Okay. Another thing we did was we organized this first Dowling Memorial Conference on Science and Technology. Here's some of the speakers. Mike Dowling giving an after-dinner speech. He was talking about John as like one Christmas, made a Christmas card saying, best wishes for Christmas from Sauron and the 9 dark nights from Lord of the Rings. And it was just, I don't have the picture here, you remember this. It was just hilarious. There's Scott Aronson during his speech, waving. Andrew White doing a John impression. John actually would do this when people were taking pictures of him. Okay, limited time. I want to say some things about John's life. Like I think many of you, and also I didn't know a lot of this stuff before, and you probably didn't also. But here are some pictures of John as a baby, being held by his mother. There's his dad, and looking pretty pudgy there, I guess, for whatever reason. I just find that very funny. He was born in New York, but then lived in many different cities across the US. And so he was very familiar with the US. His dad worked for NASA on the lunar program in the 1970s. I guess that gave him some familiarity of like science culture in the US government. Coming of age, growing up, looking very cute. I guess as American, you see the gun rack behind him. Wow. Here's a story during his coming of age. I'll read it out. Danny Medina and the Power Pole. Danny and I were nerds, you might say, while all the rest of the boys played basketball or football or some other ball. Danny and I would wander around the playground getting into mischief. The isolation was in part an excommunication placed in our heads by the other boys, since Danny and I could play no sport well. I was also in part self-isolating from ignorant morons we didn't really want to play with anyway. And Arroyo had shifted in its bed during the spring rains and had succeeded in exposing nearly the full length of a power pole, which was embedded in asphalt at the edge of the church parking lot. Danny and I took it upon ourselves to dig it out. So every day at recess, we would retire from the throbbing mob of uniformed Catholic children and further our mission to topple the pole. We dug with our hands and with broken oyster shells used to pave the roads. Our single most powerful tool, however, was time. Time. It gnaws high mountains down. How poetic. We worked steadily, we worked hard, we worked every day. Then, some months after our destruction project began, a heavy rain moved into the valley. We were in catechism class, I remember it distinctly. Sister Adeline was telling us the story of some child martyr. She wrung her veined hands as she spoke. Then, as if God himself had decided to interrupt her long-windedness, there came a wonderful tearing sound, as if someone were rigging in sheets of tin in two with their hands. Our pole was falling. Balls of blue fire showered from its summit. Electrical wires snapped and spat, writhing like angered snakes against the stormy sky. Then, in one long instant of time, the pole fell in a sweeping arc and plunged into the rushing waters of the arroyo. The classroom plunged into darkness. The steady steps of the hands on the wall clock stopped. An act of God, said Mother Henry Marie, principal and mustachioed nun. An act of God, yes, but with a little help. Oh, good. Classic Dowling. This is his college and PhD. Looking good, I must say, John. No, oh, there you go. Okay. So it's accepted, I guess. Code of misconduct. Okay, I ran out of time, right? 5 minutes. Okay. Yes, I'm going to just skip to the end. I do want to show you this. This is amazing. John was like, you know, he talked about being a nerd. He was a super nerd. He was like, he wanted to be the biggest nerd of all nerds that ever existed. And he knew how to write in this Elvish Tengwar script. Last night when I was finding this, I was like, what is this called? And I know John would be so pissed at me and correcting me if I didn't get it right. But it's called Tengwar script. And here's the writing. This is the inscription like on the ring in Lord of the Rings. He was like a super Lord of the Rings fan. So I just found this remarkable to see this. All right, let me just skip all kinds of stuff. Can you just skip to the end? And maybe I'll tell you some of the other stuff at the fun program, you know. Okay, can you exit and just go to the very end? Okay. Just go, I want to show you, just go to the last time. Oh, all right, this is funny. This is funny, the QCMC thing. Oh, no, go one more above. 2017. John was given an official proclamation by the US government, an official designation that he was a mad scientist. I mean, I never even thought that this was a possibility or heard of it before, but this happened. Whereas the Mad Scientist Initiative encourages continuous dialogue and collaboration amongst academia, and whereas the Mad Scientist Initiative identifies tomorrow's key innovations, blah, blah, blah. Now, therefore, by virtue of the authority invested in me as the TRADOC Deputy Chief Staff Intelligence, I do hereby proclaim the Professor J.P. Dowling be known henceforth and forevermore as an official mad scientist with all the rights and privileges pertaining thereto. Okay. It's a thing. Yeah. Okay, I want to tell you the story about organizing the QCMC 2018. For those who came here, who came to LSU for it, I don't know if it seemed like a mess, but I learned, you're kind of nodding, okay. Through this process, I learned that when you organize a conference, not everyone notices like all the little things, and so maybe it doesn't matter ultimately, as long as everyone has a nice time. So John was very organized at the beginning. He wrote the proposal that got us QCMC at LSU. I think he had to send it to Carl Caves. And, but then it kind of went in a weird direction from there. He arranged for all the reviewing to take place between Christmas and New Year's Day 2018. You were on the PC, right?
Yeah, so happy with that.
Yeah, no one was. Yeah, and then the next thing he did, he told the PC to just review whatever papers they wanted to. And I was, oh, and by the way, since I had organized Squint 2017, I'd said to John, I don't want to be involved in the organization of QCMC 2018. But then sitting on the side, I was copying all the emails, and I could see like, oh God, I've been involved. And so then on top of that, he went to Hawaii for vacation. Here's a picture of him in Hawaii, December 22nd, 2017. After this, I bet Mark and Wilde will never let me run a conference again. This is my first vacation in 10 years. I'm on my lanai in Hawaii, drinking wine and reading a biography about Marie Curie. Nick Studer, one of his students, is at a rave party in New Orleans. QCMC is in fine hands. So during my California vacation, I just took over the PC job. And it was extremely stressful. And then John made fun of me as being to be like that I was OCD for doing this. It was like, okay. Anyway, so that's basically the story. All right, let me go to the last part. Let's just go to the musical part. I wrote a song that is dedicated to John. I was on sabbatical in California, and I kept hearing on the radio this Ozzy Osbourne song, Mr. Crowley. I was like, oh man, that would work really well with Dr. Dowling. Go to this one, Dr. Dowling. Yeah, so this is the song. And yeah, it's just about John. Yeah, put there. So I don't know, does anyone know the Ozzy Osbourne song? Yeah. You do? Yeah, that's fine. Good. This is like a more, there's a rearrangement and all the lyrics were changed. So let's go. Oh, Dr. Dowling, what went on in your head? Oh, Dr. Dowling, oh, just making a bed. You think that your eye is magic, or it's just for the show. From Microsoft, it might seem tragic, but they probably think you're Lilliputian. Doctor, you're growling. Are you up on the rants? Have you been prowling? You in search for a grant? Your Twitter feed's quite disrespecting. What a terrible mess. The bullshit detectives detecting. Are you the main one it suggests? Have you been howling, trying to sing at the board? I think that's fouling, and it's rather bizarre. Squeezing the light of the lasers, trying to kill off the noise. Just shouting to stir all your neighbors without a care how much it annoys. You live by nobody's rules. You live by no. You live by no. You live by nobody's rules. For the final slide. Yeah. The great John Dowling will forever be missed, and we love you very much. Thank you. not really expecting any questions. Maybe a comment.
Well, if someone does want to ask a question, we do have a little bit of time before the next person picks up.
Oh, his tattoo. You know, do you know that? I knew that he had one. I didn't ask to inspect it. It would involve, yeah. What was your question? Sorry. Oh, the insult. Someone was described as a little bird-like man, which I don't know, just felt like really pushing too much. Maybe some people who know John as friends can figure out who this person was. All right.
Okay, let's
Thank you very much.
thank Mark again.